Hi everyone, we're going to get started for the Lunch and Learn. Thank you so much for coming. This is hosted by Startup NV, and we are Nevada's statewide startup accelerator and incubator. We support scalable startups, and we do this every month when we do Lunch and Learns hosted by various people in our community on different topics. And so this month we have Celeste Johnson, who's from the Applied Companies, and she's going to be telling us a little bit about hiring your first employees and a little bit more. So welcome. Yes, thank you.
Hello, Celeste Johnson with the Applied Companies. The Applied Companies, we've been in Reno now for 20 years. So this is our 20th year anniversary. And we are kind of all things workforce. And that means a lot of different things. And it's everything from recruitment. We do a lot of recruitment on all different levels to full PEO services, which I'll talk a little bit more about later. And kind of everything in between. I thought we could talk about today. Sorry, I've got two systems going, and I'll make sure I try and click on the right one. So I do want to share a little bit about the current state of the workforce to set expectations. A lot of people talk about the workforce shortage, and I want to talk about kind of the why behind that. And then we'll talk about hiring your first employee. And I have a slide, I'll be pretty quick on that one, but it's really just all the tactical things that you need to do. And we can make this presentation, I think, accessible or shareable after, so you can refer back to it. And then I want to talk a little bit about some of the problems and hopefully some solutions once you start hiring people. And what we didn't really talk about is what kind of employment number are you trying to get to? Are you thinking you're going to be at 5 or 10? And so those things do change as you grow. And we can talk more about that too as we go through this conversation. Your environment will be very different from one than when you get to 10. And some of the things you'll want to think about there. Okay, so everybody knows there's a workforce shortage, right? I hear all the time it's from the pandemic. Post-pandemic, where did all the workers go? How come they didn't all return to work? That's true. The pandemic did change the workforce landscape, and the workforce participation rate, this is something tracked by the Bureau of Labor Statistics, has been declining for over 20 years. So you can very simply see, and this is a BLS chart, that's late 1999 is where it starts. That's been the workforce participation rate trajectory for the last 20 years. In Reno, we had workforce shortage problems in 2017, 18, 19, before we ever knew of a pandemic. It was really hard to get talent. So that might help lay the foundation a little bit that this is a longer term, bigger problem than post-pandemic. I've got a few stats off to the side. The kind of the story of the stats, the population in the US has grown tremendously. The workforce has not grown with it. And there's a whole host of reasons why. People are retiring younger. Fewer people are participating because of the gig economy. I have another slide coming up. We'll go a little deeper. People are having fewer kids. They're living at home longer. They're not joining the workforce. They're staying in school longer. So it's a whole confluence of things that have kind of created this workforce percentage. In 1999, 67% of our population participated in the workforce. Now we're at about 61%. And for every percentage point, that's millions of workers. So it's just think this is a national across the board problem.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So when you say workforce, you're not including people who work for themselves?
Correct.
Okay.
Thank you. These are the W-2 workers and what we consider like kind of the traditional worker. Okay. We hear a lot about unemployment rates. Unemployment rates are low, and I hear this all the time too. Well, if the unemployment rate is so low, where are all the workers? Another rate that is tracked also by the Bureau of Labor Statistics is the quits rate. And a quits rate is a person's comfort in leaving their job knowing that they will go get another one. And the quits rate has gone up for the last at least since the last recession in 2008. So post-recession, people kind of hunkered down in their jobs because they're like, okay, I don't really know if I can get another one. And then things just sort of broke loose and people said, I don't care, I can get another job. I don't care how you treat me. Well, I do care how you treat me. If you don't treat me well, I can go get another job. So I'm very comfortable quitting. We do some temporary staffing as well. And people will jump $1 for 50 cents because they can get a job, not next week, but like this afternoon. I mean, that's how desperate employers are. So that quits rate is very meaningful in terms of the environment and how workers view their loyalty to companies. We've probably all heard about the Great Resignation. You've heard that buzzword. Now, this is a post-pandemic like result. And since the pandemic started, actually that number is higher than 4.5. It's more like 4.7 million people have left the workforce in the past couple of years. And I'll talk about some of those reasons why too. It's fascinating. In the country, in the US, there are about 11 million job openings. And at any given time, there are only about 5 million people that are considered, that are on unemployment. Now, I know that's not, it doesn't line up job for job, but it does give you an idea of the numbers and the shortage. Here are some of the reasons why there's such a low amount of workers out there. And again, it's a confluence of a lot of different things happening. The boomers retired during the pandemic. Their retirement accounts did really well for the last 10 years, and they tapped out and they're not coming back. Boomers retire at about 3 million a year, an additional 3.5 million retired on top of that. So that's over 6 million people that aren't coming back. They won't be in the workforce anymore. And they might be in some way, maybe that's the consulting roles that are out there, but that experience and institutional knowledge is gone. People relocated during the pandemic, and how many people did you hear went remote? And then they said, well, housing on the West Coast is so expensive, I'm going to work remote from Iowa, and I'm going to cash out and live very well, and I'm not coming back to an office. That happened. It really did change the psychology of workers. People view the workplace very differently, and loyalties have changed. And that's both this reluctance and this reconsideration on the bottom. People were thinking about parent care, their child care, daycare shut down, I don't know how many times over the last 2 years. One kid was sick, the whole place shut down. And parents, somebody had to stay home and manage that. And that made things very difficult for a long time. Prolonged uncertainty is real, and that's how this country lived for the last 2.5 years. And it feels like it's basically over. COVID's kind of over, but it did change the psychology of the worker. It's going to change the way you're going to recruit. So we'll talk about that a little bit too. And then there's that whole reshuffling thing. So to your point, the workforce participation rate is the W2 workers, but people can make money a lot of different ways now. They can make money online, and they can be their own independent contractor. Maybe they make something through Etsy, maybe they post videos and they start to make a few dollars that way. People can make money in Uber or DoorDash or Rover or any of those varying services. So there's ways to have some supplemental income without participating in the traditional workforce. All of that adds up to why it's so hard to find talent, attract and retain talent.
What is hysteresis?
It's hysteresis, and that is a condition that happens when there is an economic condition where the pandemic is a perfect example, where everyone's economic condition changed, so people adapted and they were out of work. And hysteresis is like almost like a paralysis, where the longer you're out of work, the harder it is to go back to work. So you've started to adjust your lifestyle and you're not going to go back.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And we saw that happen. Those unemployment was a perfect example. They kept extending unemployment. The longer people stayed on unemployment, the harder it was for them to go back to a regular 8 to 5, 7 to 3, whatever job. Any comments? What's quits rate?
That's right.
Yeah, that's that chart on the last slide where people are very comfortable leaving their job because they know they get another one. And we're seeing behaviors. I don't think I included it for today because we're kind of low on time. I didn't, but we're seeing behaviors from workers like we've never seen before. So we do a lot of exec search placement as well. These are educated, qualified, have probably been in the workforce 10+ years, and they're ghosting. They're setting appointments for interviews, they don't show up. They're accepting job offers, not showing. I mean, again, not typical behaviors. I mean, maybe once in a blue moon, but kind of a regular pattern. And it's very discouraging actually, because it's not what any of us are used to. And we talk about it in the office a lot. It's like, where's the professionalism? And I like to think someday that will come back. And they might not be able to behave the same way, but I don't know. When you look at the numbers, like the population and the workforce participation, I don't know if it supports that. So maybe this is our new normal. I don't know. A recession, there's a lot of talk of that could change some behavior. Even if it doesn't by sheer numbers, it might psychologically, because there is a little bit of fear that comes with recessions, and maybe people go, okay, I'm going to hunker down, not going to job hop as much. It's interesting.
And Southwest Airlines said that 30% of their confirmed interviews were no-shows.
Wow.
I
We see it
pretty reliable company.
Yeah, we see it all the time. Kind of frontline workers, associates, staffing associates, is probably more like 50%. And then as you move up with experience and education, it does get less, but to your point, exactly the problem. When we have a client out there now that we need to staff for, we staff it by, let's say they need 10 workers, we'll send 15, because we know maybe 8 will show. Yeah.
I got ghosted.
Yeah.
On the flip side, I know many people who have been job hunting and they apply online through Indeed and whatever and never hear that word. It's like a no acknowledgement, no.
Isn't
These are
I know,
like highly professional.
isn't that sad? And
I've also heard of people getting job interviews, taking time out of their workday to take an interview, and the hiring recruiter shows you.
oh, lovely. Yeah, because they're probably quit on the job.
Maybe.
Right, quietly quitting.
Yeah.
Yeah. My thought to that is because it just doesn't make sense. I mean, people are so hungry for talent. We have people sitting in seats that are stuck in old patterns. Yeah. And those teams or those bigger companies haven't adapted to it. Is a different time. And if you haven't adapted your recruitment department, you're missing out. Because I know, I don't understand, like, send them our way, because we would at least talk to them immediately.
I'm thinking specifically of my sister. Now her situation is different. She works for the city, the government. and
Oh, they are the worst at adapting.
And has a PhD, like kids.
Right.
And so it's like, maybe it's because it's government work and I don't know.
Oh my gosh.
Mind blowing.
I know. Trying to think with who were we recently working with, or was I talking to? But saying, and I'm kind of blanking the specifics now, but it was saying, might have been even, I don't know, it was a government type entity, and it was like this 6-month hiring process. And I'm thinking, who's going to hang in for that? But if someone is willing to, but in the meantime, though, they're missing, I don't know. There's a disconnect for sure.
I wonder how much the age category is affected too.
The generation.
Yes.
Yeah, did I put that slide? I think I took that slide out too, because we have, I have a whole presentation on just this with probably 10 more slides. because it is so interesting. And I do have a little bit of generation here, but not much. Yeah, the boomers are gone. So Gen X, my generation, and that goes up to probably about age 55 or so. By demographic, we're 30 million fewer than the millennials behind us. So there's just not enough numbers. The numbers aren't there. But then the millennial generation is bigger, and now they have experience. The top end of the millennials are now 40. And I hear people talk about millennials, sadly so negatively too. I think millennials are great. But I've said that a few times. I'm like, but they're 40 now, they have 20 years experience. And people are like, oh, they're so stuck in wanting to make fun of millennials. I'm like, no, you got to pass that on to Gen Z now, make fun of them. They're the ones that don't have the experience yet. Every generation comes in with no, I mean, that's how it works. Okay. Anything else on this weird world? All right, so you're going to hire an employee. This is your toolkit. And it is that yellow is a little hard to see, but a few things you need to do to hire your first employee. If you haven't already set up an EIN, you need to do that. Some people start their business as a sole proprietor, they use their SOC, but you do have to have an EIN to start your withholding for your employee. You'll have to set up some federal and state accounts, depending where your employee is located, to get them paid properly. I would say have some outsource payroll. It's cheap, and then you don't have to do this. And this is that admin work that's going to take you away from building your business and doing what you need to do. But they are the necessary evils. You've got to check these boxes. You've got to have work comp. So, right, you know that. Let's see, job description. One thing to talk about with everything that I just told you about the workforce, actually set a budget for hiring your first person and think about it a little broader than an ad on Indeed and what that might cost. And think about how much time do I spend thinking about talking to, looking at resumes, and try to put a dollar value to that. And then set a budget. COV is cost of vacancy. So if you start looking at what does it cost me, and you can establish some dollar amounts around that to not have a person, that will help you weigh what you need to do when it's time to get that person. Cost of vacancy. If you Google cost of vacancy calculators, there are a million online. So you don't need to create it by yourself. Just Google cost of vacancy calculator.
Do you think you could send us that slide redone? I literally cannot read a word.
Yeah.
It'd be really, I really want to check those boxes, but I
Yeah,
can't read
we'll
them.
send you the whole deck. I know it's kind of a funky color up on the, but I would say, as you're building your business and you're setting your budget, spend some time on this and thinking about how much time are you spending doing work that you could have someone else do? How much time are you spending looking for that right person? How much money does it cost to not have someone in the seat? And then that will help you sort of quantify your next move. There are a lot of resources out there too in terms of pay. So, I mean, you can always reach out to TAC too. We have a lot of like pay scale things that we subscribe to, and we can help guide you on pay if you don't really know, or if you have a sense. But this one too, this is interesting. I think it's interesting. Learn how to interview. I think I certainly did this until I really got into what we do and what we sell. Is we take for granted the value of an interview and how to actually do it. And I would say, find some resources or practice on someone, or Google behavioral interviewing. You're going to get so much more out of a behavioral interview with someone then asking them, okay, so tell me about yourself. Or tell me about your last job, and leaving it kind of open-ended. And try to teach yourself how to listen for the answers. And in those answers, you will see those little yellow flags that you need to be aware of, or red flags. I would spend, I still do now, when I'm interviewing for a position at TAC, I spend probably at least an hour prepping for an hour of interview time. So that means you think about the job, I look at the job description, I look at the person's resume, and I start building my behavioral questions around it. And building my questions takes me a while. I spend at least half of that time building these questions. And then as I ask the questions, I take notes throughout the interview. And then I go back and look at those notes, and that's where I look for answers that go, okay, that looks like a little bit of a flag.
Could you explain a little bit more about what a behavioral interview
Yeah.
is?
Yeah, so it's a question like, tell me about a time you were asked to do something that you didn't know how to do. And what was the result? That's digging a little deeper than strengths and weaknesses. Tell me about a time you were part of a team and how you contributed to the team and what was the result of the project that you worked on. Often they're like, those are the keywords, like, tell me about a time. Maybe it's somebody, maybe it's an intern and they don't have a ton of job experience, that's fine. Tell me about a time you worked on a school project with others. And what was the project and what was the result? And how did you see yourself as a member of the team? And so there's there's ways you can scale those to the experience. I have a guidebook. I'm happy to share that out to kind of post this meeting of behavioral questions that I love. I've used for probably 10 years. There's great questions in there around leadership, integrity, and it kind of digs into different topics. Decide if you want to do background checks, drug screens, what that means. You need to do your, go see Liz for
35% of everybody who comes in has to cheat on their drug test.
Wow.
Do they cheat?
That's ambitious.
That was probably the most gobsmacked statistic we have.
How do they cheat?
They try to bring in fake urine. Oh, they bite off the internet under.
So they don't know that temperature is taken?
They don't understand anything. They read on the internet that you could buy fake pee, and it's usually fluorescent orange.
Oh my God.
It's fluorescent orange. Okay, so 4 people take these, what they call, they detox, and they won't be able to.
Oh, yeah. But then
Alcohol,
it's,
and it's also, it's like Tang.
Yeah,
That's the
yeah.
best
So-
description I can give you.
right.
The 35%. That, so add that to your.
How many of your client companies have removed marijuana altogether?
Virtually all of them, except the ones that you actually.
Safety. Yeah.
Safety, so our construction companies.
Yeah,
keep them,
drivers.
and our DOT, Department of Transportation people. And so what we tell people once they cheat, which they would say, what are you afraid of? When it's THC, here's the deal. GSR doesn't screen for it. So you have 2 hours to sit in our waiting room,
Right.
or if we're really.
Rehydrate.
Yes, and we'll do it, but we're really clear and say, we can do whatever you want, this failed,
Right.
and we can put you as a fail, and
Right.
we've never had anyone hired who was a fail, but you could be the first, or you can sit in our waiting room for 2 hours,
Yeah.
and we'll throw away that test and we'll start fresh.
Yeah.
What do you want to do? And that's how we know.
Yeah, we live in a state that has legalized marijuana. That's the new norm. You will have to put together your new hire documents. You're gonna need an I-9, you're gonna need a W-4. There are some Nevada specific documents like Nevada Workplace Safety, so you'll need those. You have to assemble that packet. I would strongly suggest you get an application and don't use just a resume, because an application has language at the bottom that has the person attest to their experience or to the fact that they had a criminal background or they didn't. Over the years, many times I've gone back to that attestation and they've lied, and that makes for a really easy termination if you ever have to pull that lever. So don't accept just a resume as your package. You can find applications. All this is easily accessible online. Super easy Google searches. Think about how you want to track wage an hour. wage an hour. This is one of those things that feels like an afterthought, but if you don't get it right, it's just ticky-tacky stuff. But if you don't get it right, it is the easiest thing for somebody to come back and bite you with. All they have to do is go to the Department of Labor, and then you have an issue if you didn't do it correctly. And it's admin stuff. It stinks that we have to do it, but it's those things we have to absolutely track. So think about that, maybe outsource that. So if you find a payroll company or you use a platform for payroll, find a timekeeping system that syncs with it and have them track their time correctly. Like you have to know about overtime law. And then as you build, you know, if you have one person, you can probably get away with not really having policies or a handbook yet. It depends on the person. You're laughing. I mean, they may say, what's my vacation time? It's probably good to get that written down. But as you start to build employees, absolutely build that out. You're going to need a handbook. You're going to need some policies. That's how you're going to recruit too. We have had clients over the years that say, you know, let them take whatever time off they want. Okay. That became very popular a few years ago. It kind of works, but it really doesn't. So you can be, it doesn't mean you can't be flexible or accommodating, but have a little bit of a guideline. It just seems like it comes back. The nicer you are, the more that's going to come back and bite you later.
Do people actually abuse that?
It tends to be not so much abuse while they're employed and they're happy. It tends to be a problem when they're no longer happy. And they either get termed or they've quit and they're like, where's my bank of PTO? Because they've secretly been keeping track. And they want these big payouts.
They don't get it because unlimited vacation means no.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. The benefits the employer, right? Because I've worked with those people. They're like, yeah, unlimited, but we're all like these worker bees.
Right.
Let's do it. So
Right.
Right.
And that truly, like, as you're, and we'll talk about culture on the next slide. Now going the other way, as you're trying to build a really good culture, you want people to take time off.
Yeah.
Because burnout is real. And people do exactly that. They kill themselves and they never take a single day because there's this, I don't know what it is.
Competitive spirit.
Yeah. And if you get so big that you have so many employees, you can't really keep track and put some guardrails around it and say, hey, you know,
You gotta take,
yeah, and make it generous. Make it 4 weeks or 5 weeks. Make it really generous. And then hope people, you know, take that downtime. Okay. So here are a few. Uh-oh.
I think you're pressing the laser.
I think I am too. There we go. Okay. Okay, so here are a few things to think about, and I want to look at my notes, make sure I talk about all this. I don't miss anything good. As you start to build out your employees. 1 second here, my laptop timed out on me. Okay. Culture, which we just chatted about. You start to get 2 or 3, 4 people, you're going to start to get a culture that takes place. And so I would say culture is all, I mean, it's like families, right? They all vary. Some families are toxic and some families are high functioning, but there's a lot of different ways to do that. But I would say just without a right or wrong, have intention around it and actually spend some time thinking, what kind of culture do I want? Do I want a culture that's super competitive? Do I want a culture where people feel like they have a lot of flexibility? And maybe there's both woven in there somehow. You will get to a point where you can't manage everyone. So then think about, okay, who was employee 1? Was or is employee 1 the person that's going to be senior leadership throughout this, or will that person stay where they are and I'm adding other employees? Will that person manage other people? Will I manage the, you know, who knows how these scenarios will play out, but again, spend some time thinking about that. people will, as you're recruiting, say, what is the career path? What are my opportunities? It can get a little tricky too. So your first employee might not be somebody you promote, and you might be bringing people in with higher salaries and more responsibility. How are you going to have those conversations? And still show the person that maybe was number one, that they're valuable, but maybe they're not going to be, you know, your future heir apparent. Thinking about what you will be working on. So as work shifts, entrepreneurs maybe are a little bit control freakish. So will you start to let things go? Do you have to have your hands in everything? Maybe for a while. But will there come a time where somebody takes over a system and figures it out, and you trust that they have it, and you're moving on for more business development maybe? But awareness around that for sure. Okay, one-to-ones. I think that's probably one of the most critical things for success. One-to-ones are where some of the culture happens. That's where you truly learn, you develop those relationships with people. You learn what they are working on, maybe what their fears are, or what their hopes are in the role. It may be, you know, if you get to 10 employees, you're not going to probably have regular one-to-ones with everybody. So maybe that's where you put that management layer in, one-to-ones there, and then they have one-to-ones. A company that has one-to-ones with people on a regular basis, I think, is going to be much more successful than a company that doesn't. There's just good stuff that happens in those meetings. Okay, so between listening and setting a best example too, how are you behaving? And think about too, like your own growth and your own development. What coach do you have, or what, like I used Vistage for a number of years. That's a CEO group, and it's a peer group, and we process issues together, but there's many others that do a similar. That was really good for me in my development. There were a lot of things, behaviors that I had that I needed to work on, and that because direct reports are not going to tell you. You're not going to hear it from people you've hired, most likely. So think about like your own growth and how you're behaving around the office. So are you celebrating the wins? How are you handling losses? You know, are you handling them? Hey, losses happen. Or are you holding up in your office with the door shut? So all of those things contribute to the culture and are things to be aware of. You're going to have problems. You're going to have problems with employees. So once you start hiring employees, you're going to have a great hiring process, I'm sure. Get them on board, have a great culture, things will happen. Maybe it's outside conditions, maybe it's the economy, maybe it's the pandemic. I mean, we all went through a lot there. Employees will surprise you. Sometimes you think somebody's great and you find out that they're not. They may have some really bad performance behaviors that you can't see right away. It happens. I've been made aware through different workforce type relationships that no matter if your hiring process is as good as it can be, you're still only going to get a good fit 70% of the time. So prepare yourself and don't beat yourself up when somebody doesn't work out. And sometimes you have a really great employee that does work out, but they get sick, or there's a family issue that comes up. How are you going to handle that? Can you have them gone for 12 weeks? Yeah, so any other comments, questions on some of those things as you think about adding employees?
Yeah. What are some good ways for employers to show that their first employee is valuable while hiring other people?
Yeah, I mean, I think, okay, so one-to-ones for sure. I think that first employee, over communicate, bring them, let them see and grow.
Mm.
And coaching is a gift for people. So if there's an opportunity to coach them and teach them, that is a gift. And most employees embrace that gift. It would probably be unusual if they didn't want to learn and grow more. You have to be fair with compensation in the marketplace. It's just where we are. It's good to have some kind of benefit package. I know that's really hard to get up and running right out of the chute when it's only one or two. It's hard to put that kind of thing together. But maybe that's where you overcompensate a little with time off or flexibility or hybrid work, if that's, if you're able to do that. I would also say to get them good equipment. Don't give them the leftover laptop or a slow connection. If they're working from home, make sure they have really good internet, just like little things like that. Like make the workday smooth and comfortable, spend money on a nicer chair, get them a standing desk. All those little things really are little in the grand scheme. So make those investments. Ask, what do you need? What would make you happy? Always good to ask. Okay, any other thoughts? All right, so we're going to do a little group activity, and you guys can all kind of, I don't think anybody needs to move, just maybe kind of turn yourselves towards each other and see what you would do if this situation came up, which is real, by the way. So you had an employee quit, they went to the Department of Labor and said they were misclassified. So you hired this person as non-exempt. Non-exempt is an hourly person and you paid him hourly. Then somewhere along the line, you moved him to a salary. You said, you know what, I don't want to deal with hours anymore. I'm just going to pay you, pick up a number, $50,000 a year. But you don't have it in writing anywhere. So you don't have any documentation to back up. You just made the move. So the employee is gone. They went to the Department of Labor and they said that you owed regular wages, you owed overtime. You don't think you did because you paid them a salary, but they think that you owe them overtime and some commission. Let's say you do have a handbook, but the employee, you never actually got the employee to sign it. So what would you do? What are your next steps? And go.
Okay, they didn't like.
Okay.
College.
And we'll like chat for like 5-8 minutes or so, and then we'll be just you guys here. Yep, and you're welcome to participate too.
I'm thinking
Okay.
about my thinking cap on.
That's a good one.
So that when we talk to the attorney, I can be like, this is where it is.
Save some words.
Yeah,
So basically, you're looking for your CYA emails, right? Yeah. That's what you're looking for?
exactly. Yeah,
I like that one.
I don't throw away emails.
Search system.
Yeah, exactly.
Close it off.
Yeah.
Okay.
What else?
I'm interested in what happens when an employee goes from a regular paycheck to a salary paycheck. At that point, isn't the fact that there is a written or produced paycheck an agreement, and didn't that person sign like the back of it saying that they accept this type of payment?
Oh, interesting. That's a great question.
Is that- I didn't know if it would sure, but
Basically, you're saying endorsing your.
well, it seems to me that when the pay changed, would have been the time for that employee to say, wait a minute, I don't understand this, and I am not agreeing to it.
This actually
So-
happened to me and I didn't realize I could go.
So by casting that check,
Right, are we back to that
I
one?
was
Yeah.
like,
So the employee didn't know they were going to a salary? Or they just
No, they
said-
did.
they're
Now
saying they didn't know.
Now they're an ex-employee.
because it was all.
Well, because signing a check
Yeah.
isn't, no, because they could have done the same amount of hours every paycheck. So who's to say that it's salary.
I think it would depend on the pay and things because the labor, there are certain employees you can't exempt just be say they're exempt. So even if they accept that, I've had clients who have employees come back after the fact because they learned that they were entitled to overtime.
And that's kind of what this is,
because
right?
they were- So just like getting their check. If you violated the law, that's why they go to Department of Labor. If you violate those laws, you're gonna get them, even if they.
So what,
Call the employee on a recorded line. Just checking in. See what you can get them to press up.
Great.
This is an ex-employee, by the way.
Yeah, they're not gonna like you.
and then there's the issue of you never signed him, he or she, they.
So then they're not entitled to anything, right?
I would think so. We said, well, does that mean that they didn't, it's the onus on the employee?
Yeah,
Or
it's
the
on the
employer? So by not signing, is that mean that he's not agreeing or that he is not in contract at all?
Exactly.
So I don't know what the laws are, so I guess that those would be the questions. What does an actual unsigned handbook mean? And is the onus on the employee or the employer to do it? I would assume that it'd be the hiring department that needs to cross the.
You're the hiring department is what I'm saying, right? If you think about it, we're business owners, we is it.
Yeah. Exactly. I mean, we don't know how far along they are. I mean, you're going from. I assumed it was a larger company, just because if you're moving someone from hourly to a salary, I can't see myself hiring one person salary. I'm not even on salary.
Like,
That'd be nice.
work that we do, and this is why I ended up getting reclassified in the job that I was in years ago. There's such a slippery slope of work,
Yeah.
and so salary a lot of the times is much cheaper.
Yes.
Just-
Yeah, totally understood.
Okay,
True.
Yeah.
And also. It's not usually until a company has grown to
Yeah.
a certain size that they actually do the salary employee thing. They usually start out as hourly, but I mean, there are exceptions to the, it's not even a rule. So that's normally done, but.
Just like the first thing would be to go and find out from the DOL, okay, when did the employee say they went from hourly to salary, and then check back against your own record to see if that, so where you're working from, plus or minus.
Well, and we're saying that the employee was aware, and that awareness makes him responsible for saying something at a time, not after he's already. Keep saying after they have already quit.
See, that's tough though, because there's a lot of employees, I'm sure they're gonna be really nervous to go to an employer and say, hey, by the way, you changed this over, how come I haven't got paid yet,
So what's the answer?
Well, you want the bad news?
Doesn't matter here.
The employee isn't responsible for any of it.
Yeah.
It's all on the employer, the onus, it all falls on the employer, sorry. So yes, you're on the right track. In terms of, and this is a federal law, Fair Labor Standards Act, FLSA, that's the classification of an employee, which is so critical. And it goes back to the work that they're doing. So you have to have a job description for your employee. And then the work in that job description is defined, and it does get a little gray. But for the most part, it's pretty defined. If that employee can be classified as non-exempt or exempt, it's not up to the employer to decide just willy-nilly. It has to be based on the work. To be a true exempt employee, you have to be a decision maker. And that doesn't mean I'm making a decision of how many copies to make. It has to be a financially impactful decision to the company. So you really almost have to be like somebody that has access to the financials and is making, big decisions to be salaried. If a Department of Labor claim comes through, the onus is all on the employer to prove otherwise. The employee doesn't have to prove anything. until, unless the employer does come back and prove, and then the employee's like, well, I'm cut out. That's why this one is such a good example of that little ticky-tacky stuff that will come back and bite you. In this particular case, this was a client of ours, that in a prior life, before they worked with us, this happened and it turned into a $252,000 settlement.
Oh my God.
Because it didn't extend just to that employee. And this is a small business, right? This isn't Panasonic where that's a rounding error. This is their year of profitability. Because then they can start looking at every other employee too. So you're opening your life. And so it's very important, have those job descriptions, have those classifications done correctly, and track their time. That's why you want a timekeeping system.
So with a penalty like that, is that for one employee, or was that like how it affected the whole company? 'Cause it seems like, yeah, they're owed regular wages, overtime and commission.
Yeah, no, that particular one was a small business, but it wasn't just the one person. Yeah. Yeah, I know. It's an expensive mistake to make, and set it up. It's cheap to set up a timekeeping system because those are your records. A paycheck isn't a record of timekeeping. It's just, that's your final pay each week or however often.
My understanding is too, that they're gonna be able to really like, because I have a client, he is a construction. And he had a worker working for him, he was taking uptown, gave the worker a job to work on a house. Said, I don't care what you do, as long as it's done, blah, blah, blah. Had a tracker on the vehicle that the employee was driving. Yeah, the employee lied about all the time that they were working and tried to say that they were working. Then your excuse was, you don't understand how long it takes. It's like, oh, I've been doing it for years, right? Said, well, if you don't pay me everything I want, I'm going to tell my dad. So he's working with dad. His dad called him up, gave him a bunch of crap. Said, no, I'm sorry, I'll pay him this much. This is how many hours he worked. I've got proof of it because the vehicle, right, he was driving back and forth. Right. When they took it to the DOL, the employee.
Yeah.
The employee still got money?
What's that?
The employee got money?
Yeah, the DOL is, the burden is always going to fall on the employer to show otherwise. Yeah. So, okay, but the good news is, sorry, wrong clicker. The good news is there are resources and you don't have to do all this on your own. And these resources can be scalable. So they can be very low cost as you're starting. And then as you get bigger, obviously the resources expand and they get more expensive, but it's scalable. So I'll spend just a couple minutes telling you what a PEO is. Or who's familiar with what professional employer organization? Okay, that's what that stands for. Let me jump to this one and show you a little video of what a PEO is and how they can help you do a lot of what we just talked about today.
You might have to click on those.
Okay. There we go.
You start a business because you have a great idea. You start a business so you can see your idea grow. But you don't start a business because you love paperwork, compliance, and other administrative responsibilities. Lucky for you, there are businesses who are very good at handling these critical services. In fact, it's the very idea they started on. They're called professional employer organizations, or PEOs, and they transform the business of doing business so you can focus on what you're best at, on what matters most to your employees, and on why you started your business in the first place. With a PEO, you get the peace of mind that comes with the expertise of a full-service HR department, and the benefits are undeniable. Companies using a PEO are 50% less likely to go out of business. The revenue growth is higher and employee turnover is lower. So focus on growing your idea and leave the compliance assistance, payroll, benefits, risk management, you name it, to us. PEOs, we help businesses grow.
So that's what a PEO is, and it's good to have a little bit of education about that as you grow, and they are scalable. Here's the definition. TAC is a PEO. There are others out there. But we handle, so like we have a platform with a payroll timekeeping system for our clients. We pay all of their quarterlies, we handle their SUTA accounts. So it's all, again, that ticky-tacky stuff that can eat up a lot of your time instead of you growing your business. And not to mention there's HR support too. So when scenarios like that come up, you have a resource, an HR professional that you say, hey, okay, I want to talk this through. Or you have the chronic time and attendance abuser. How do I handle this? Or I have a work comp injury, but they're also a poor performer. How do I handle this? Those are situations that we walk our clients through on a daily basis to hopefully keep them out of trouble. It's all about risk management. So you spend the dollars on risk management on the front end by getting everything dialed in. Or you have that scare of bigger, more expensive issues down the road. As we were thinking about this, and as you're growing, we were talking, Tierney and I were talking about what other resources do you want to have partnerships with out there to help you through like your growth plan. And these are some things that came to mind. I mentioned payroll companies several times. I would say with all the options out there and the platforms and the costs, don't try to do it yourself. Outsource payroll. I mean, and a timekeeping system too. Talk to your CPA if you have one. If you don't, maybe start thinking about that they're a good trusted business advisor for you. Legal doesn't hurt to have an attorney in the back pocket that you have a relationship with. Our clients access our attorney through us, which is kind of a nice way for them to have a relationship with an HR attorney. But there's many in town. Usually takes a retainer though to start that. I'm going to jump over to HR consultants too, because HR consultants are good. If they're good, they can do a lot of the things don't necessarily you need to pay an attorney for. So their hourly fee is probably going to be a lot more reasonable to do things like job descriptions handbook. Most employment law attorneys don't really want to do that anyway. So, you know, probably $500 an hour here versus $200 here. So think about where you put your work. Insurance brokers, have a good relationship with an insurance broker. You're going to need insurance on different levels. And recruiters, using recruiters. So back to that, oh, I'm sorry, one sec. Back to that cost of vacancy and the cost of your time to recruit versus the cost of a recruiter. Almost always it's less to use a recruiter. And platforms, there are a lot of platforms to choose from. Yeah, sorry.
I was gonna say, you have a 401k.
Yes, thank you. We didn't put that on there. I think you mentioned that and I blew it. I didn't put it on the slide.
What was it?
401k, like a financial planner and setting up a 401k. Yeah. I think that brings us home. Oh, and then there's harvest. So the whole, this was a plant themed talk and it was grow.
Here we grow.
Here we grow. Thank you. Okay, so this is my picture. Actually, I'm originally from Iowa. And this is probably a 10-year-old picture, but this is out from our farm in Iowa, looking west to Sunset. And the tractor in the gray, they were headed home and it's harvest. And that's my favorite picture. It was my Facebook profile for a long time. So anyway, so hopefully you'll have your harvest from your business. Now we're done. All right. Any other questions too?
What do you think about platforms like Gusto?
Yeah, so we have had clients with Gusto, we've had clients with Paylocity. I think they're fine. They're all good, they're robust. They usually look very good. It depends what do you need. And if you're looking for the platform to be an HR solution, that's where my opinion differs. And I say you can't click your way through HR issues.
Yeah.
That's where you want to have a partnership with an HR firm that you trust, and you can have those conversations because they're too subjective. Like you've got to dig into them. Platforms are not going to pick up the phone. They're going to be a self-help portal. But just fine. While you're in growth mode, they're inexpensive and they'll get you what you need. Until you get to, there's that critical level somewhere. I would say around 10 employees. That's when you might want to switch your thinking to, okay, I need a partner now that is a little more HR focused. Still offering a platform. And that's where a PEO probably comes in. Thanks, everyone.
So thank you so much, everyone, for coming. We're gonna have another lunch and learn next month. It's gonna be on November 9th, so you're welcome to join us for that. But thank you so much again.